Welcome to Igniting the Spark. I'm your host, Stephanie James, and I am overjoyed and honored and delighted to have the wonderful Lynne McTaggart with us today. Welcome to Igniting the Spark, Lynn.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
Thank you, Lynn. Oh my goodness. There are so many questions and so many things I want to talk to you about. So I want to dive in. One of the things that I love about what you do, it's this beautiful blend of modern science and ancient wisdom. Can you talk a little bit about your journey to this spiritual and science blend?
Okay, I'm not Jewish, but there's a wonderful Jewish word for this, and I think it's hablunget. My Jewish friends have taught me this, and it means I got mixed up, I got lost. And by that I mean I was minding my own business when I started my work. As in my 20s, I was an investigative reporter, and that was the big plan. I was going to put bad guys in jail. And my first big story was busting international baby selling rings by posing as an unwed mother. Remember, I was in my early 20s, and later as an adoptive parent, a would be adoptive parent. So I did all of that and I wrote that into a book called The Baby Brokers. And that was going to be my life. But in my early 30s, I started a newsletter at the time. Now it's an international magazine called What Doctors Don't Tell You with my husband, who is British and also a journalist. And the two of us felt very strongly that a lot of medicine, conventional medicine, was dangerous and unproven. And so we wanted to alert people to that. And then we also wanted to examine what actually works and has evidence of working in alternative medicine and in integrative medicine. So, in the course of doing that, I kept coming across very good studies of things like spiritual healing, acupuncture, homeopathy. And the journalist in me said, wait a minute, if you can have a thought and send it to someone else, and that's what spiritual healing is in a sense, and make them better, well, that undermines everything we think about how the world works. So I set on a quest without a compass. I convinced my publishers to let me write a book that I didn't know the contents of. I knew there was something like fields, but I wondered, is it human energy fields? Are they individual to people? I had no idea. But I thought if I talked to frontier scientists, physicists, biologists, etc., they're going to tell me, and it'll be a fairly easy thing to write it all up. That's not what happened. What happened when I started investigating this was meeting many scientists whose experimental work was a small piece of what compounds into a completely new view of the world, a completely new science. So I had to learn a lot about quantum physics and also decode their stuff because scientists like that talk in math, they talk in code and equations. So I had to turn that into plain English and also synthesize what all of them were discovering in different ways. And so that became my book, The Field. But there was unfinished business. There was some experimental evidence demonstrating that thoughts are things, but also thoughts that are things that affect other things. They're trespassers. They can go out and affect other things. And that was well documented by quantum physics, too, the whole idea of the observer effect. So that's why I got involved in intention, is the long answer to your question. I wanted to test this. And I also wanted to see what happens when lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time.
Well, and through listening to your book, The Power of Eight, those early experiments when you were having people put thought and intention into pea pods, and the difference between the pea pods that grew because there was thought or intention on them, and then the ones that did not grow as well that were not getting the intention. And then you moved that eventually to people. Can you talk a little bit about, for people that don't know what the power of eight is and how that piece of your research has transpired?
Hey, so as I said, I was really interested in how far can we take this? And this was back in the early 2000s when there was a lot of popular stuff about manifestation and all of that and the law of attraction. So I wanted to test it. And as I say, I was fascinated, thought at the same time, does that magnify the effect? So I wrote my next book, which was called The Intention Experiment, as a collation of all of the science around intention. And there's loads of it, but it was also an invitation. I figured at the time I had a lot of readers because the field was in 30 languages by that time. And I also knew a lot of these scientists from interviewing them, et cetera. And they're all working in prestigious universities like Princeton, University of Arizona, Penn State, and so forth. So I thought if I just put them together, I'll have the biggest global laboratory in the world. So that's what I did. In 2007, I started the intention experiment. And every so often, I would talk to one of the scientists and we would devise an experiment. And they would set it up in a laboratory or out there in the field. And then I'd invite my readers to come onto some platform. In the beginning, it was my website. And later it was YouTube and all kinds of platforms. And send an intention, the same intention, to that target. So the one you're talking about, seeds, they were actually barley seeds.
Oh,
This was set up by the University of Arizona, and they would take 30 seeds each on a card that they would label A, B, C, D. They would send me photographs of all four um, uh, sets of seeds. And the first time I ran that experiment, I was speaking in front of an audience in Sydney, Australia. So I invited them to do this intention experiment with me. So I let them choose which seeds we were going to do, A, B, C, D. We didn't tell the scientists which ones. We did our 10-minute intention. That's all I ever do. We then notified the scientists we were done. We didn't tell them what seeds we focused on, but that was their cue to plant all four sets of seeds. And 5 days later, to measure them. After the end of the 5 days, I then unblinded the study and said, well, it was seeds A or whichever ones it was. And lo and behold, those seeds grew significantly higher than the controls. So just think about this little bit of mind-blowing extra for a moment. First of all, we were sending intention to something that was 8,000 miles away from us. We were in Sydney, Australia. The seeds were in Tucson, Arizona, 8,000 miles away if you go via California. And we weren't sending intention to the seeds themselves. We were sending intention to a photograph of the seeds, a symbolic representation of the seeds. Yet we had an effect. And we ran that study 5 more times in different locations with different size audiences, including one time over the internet with my audience scattered around the globe. Every single time, the seed sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. So that was mind boggling, but we moved on to purifying water. We did a batch of experiments with water. We then moved on to, I was a little tired of seeds and leaves and water. And so I said, let's do something huge. And I had a whole team of scientists for this one. I said, let's lower violence in a war-torn area. So our first time was Sri Lanka, which was going through a 25-year war. And we had a really interesting effect. Violence quadrupled the week of our intention. We did it for a whole week, 10 minutes a day for 8 days. But then it plummeted to well below what it had been before. And we had Dr. Jessica Utz, a professor of statistics at the University of California, working on all this data. But then, then within a few months, this had been a totally intractable war. No side was winning anything. The rebels had choked off the North. They had captured the whole North. Within a few months after our intention, the government, which had not been gaining any ground whatsoever, was able to take back the entire North. And the reason for all of the violence during our week was that it won a number of decisive battles that turned around the entire course of the war. And 5 months after that, the war was over. So, did we do this? Short answer, who knows? Because there are many variables. But we have run about 10 peace intention experiments since that time. And every single one has shown some sort of effect. We did it with St. Louis, Missouri, the officially most violent place in America. And the very neighborhood we were focusing on, violence went down by 43%, whereas violence continued to go up in all the areas around it, including St. Louis as a whole. So we've had a lot of success. We even focused on someone who had post-traumatic stress disorder and turned his life around. So of the 41 experiments we've done to date, 37 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. There's no pharmaceutical drug out there with that consistent track record.
That is so exciting. I mean, it's so thrilling. I love thinking about this because I remember the book Messages in Water and how when you can change what a single drop of water looks like with your words, with the intention, and these drops of water that were put into a hyperbaric chamber afterwards and then either formed gorgeous crystals, if it was love, or if it was, I remember specifically the one that was I hate you, and it was just this ugly brown, not formed, it never formed into a crystal. So again, just the power of that and how much of our own bodies are water.
Absolutely. We are about 70% water. So that is really significant. And that's one reason why I wanted to do so many experiments on water, because I was thinking we're walking flotation tanks. So it was all of those experiments that got me thinking, what if I shrunk this down to a workshop setting? I wonder how I could do that. And that's when one day I was kicking this around with my husband and other members of our team. And I said, I don't know, maybe I'll just put them in groups of 8 or so and have them send intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And my husband's a great headline writer. So he looked at me and he went, I love it. The power of 8. And that's how we got the name, essentially. And we didn't know what was going to happen. So I put people into groups of 8 or so, had them send healing intention to a member of the group with some sort of health challenge. And we expected it to be a very mild feel-good effect. But the next day, when they came back, the people who were the attendees, when they came back and we asked the recipients of the intention to take the mic and say if they had any change, any feelings, anything happen, figuring they're all going to say, oh, that felt really nice and relaxing. That wasn't what they said. What they said was there was a woman with terrible arthritis and she had been limping all weekend and she walked in normally. And there was somebody else with bad depression. He said it feels like it's lifted today. And someone else with irritable bowel syndrome who said her gut was normal. And amazingly, somebody with cataracts who said, I think they're about 80% better today. So I was completely freaked by this and didn't know what to think. So I thought, I better keep testing this. So every time I ran a workshop or spoke somewhere, I would put people into Power of 8 groups. Every time I ran a course, I started putting people into Power of 8 groups. Even a few years after that, I started a year-long course so that I could teach people all of the rudimentaries of intention, as you said, a mix of ancient wisdom and modern science. I had amalgamated them into a simple program that people can follow. Um, what I would do now, and what I started doing years ago, was teaching people, but then putting them into groups in their time zone and encouraging them with all kinds of ways, with information and coaching and uh, clinics throughout the year to meet together for a whole year. And that's when I saw really amazing things happen. I've had 3 people get up out of their wheelchairs, one paralyzed from the neck down. I've had another woman who could barely even walk on crutches throw her crutches away after one intention experiment. A woman who was going blind from retinal damage, doctors could do nothing, could barely drive, and deaf, regained their hearing. Somebody else who had a genetic liver disease and was a candidate for a liver transplant. Her liver is absolutely normal. One power of 8 session. So I've seen miracles over and over and over again. And I really had to investigate why. And that was one reason it took me 10 years to write that book, The Power of 8, from the first time I saw some effect, because I needed to understand why this is working.
What is magic about the number 8? Is there some magic to that number, Lynn?
Well, the short answer is it was an accident, of course, because it was the power of 8. I just threw it out of my head. It doesn't have to be 8. It works with 7. It works with 12. I think when you get to below 5, you don't really have a group. And if it's more than about 12 or 13, it gets a little unwieldy and difficult for everybody to have a turn in good time. So, but there's a lot of um, historical connection and mythology around the number 8. It's good luck in Chinese. It's a sideways infinity sign. There are all kinds of references to it in the Bible, loads of them, and many things like that. So it does have a lot of symbolism for people. But as I said, it came about exactly as I described it. So maybe there are no accidents, and maybe it wasn't an accident. I like to think that.
Yeah, I like to think that as well. And I love the thing about the infinity sign because I always think about the interdependent relationships that we have with one another in all things. And so it's that beautiful, the energy and the love flowing out from us and coming back to us. And Lynn, would you speak about the mirror effect of healing that's a part of this?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I started noticing something with my intention experiments. So these are the experiments working with a scientist and with up to 25,000 people participating. I always, since 2008, have people I survey people after they take part. And the reason I do that is when I first started out, we had so many people wanting to take part that on my website would jam or they might not be able to get on or whatever. And so I wanted to just find out, was everything okay? I asked a few other questions. How was that for you? And I was shocked at the answers. I found that um, people were writing in things like, I felt like I was part of a higher network. I was sobbing uncontrollably. I had goosebumps up and down my arms. I felt the connection. I felt so much heat. I had to stand away from my computer. That was me too. I had to stand away from my computer. It was so hot. And it's not. Normally, I'm feeling it now. It's fine. But that wasn't the only thing they said. They also said, uh, and it was a total mirror effect, I'm getting along better with my not so nice boss and my coworkers. I've made up with my estranged partner or my estranged children. Um, About half say they feel more love for everyone they come in contact with. They're hugging strangers. Excuse me. About 40% say that their relationships have improved. About one third say that they some sort of illness in their body has healed. About a third either healed or got much better.